Okay. If somebody would just indicate whether you can hear me in the chat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do just a couple stories. I haven't done this for a while. I've been away traveling. And so I'm going to, just like I said, do a couple stories, give you a little preview of Sunday's update. And then I might take a question or two. So if you have a question, type it in all caps question. And it looks like people are getting me. You can hear me, so that's good. So just let me tell you a little bit about what's been going on. I've been traveling a bit. I did a conference last weekend with Hope for Our Times at Rockwall, Texas. Tom Hughes, Olivier Melnick, J.B. Hickson, Alex Newman. I'm going to forget somebody. So you can get that at hopeforourtimes.com. You can still sign up for the live stream. There is a modest fee, something on the order of $19 or $20, I think, will get you access for about 30 or 60 days to listen to those videos. So let me just do a couple quick stories. So first of all, we know that the reports out of Russia are that Prigozhin, the head of Wagner, is dead. Now, there are a ton of stories floating around there, and I guess the question would be, does anybody die a normal death anymore? You know, they just die and nobody have conspiracy theories about what happened or that didn't die or that they are still living. There are a lot of, if you want to read the stories about this, you can go to the Daily Mail. They have a bunch of stories saying that Prigozhin is still alive. He's in hiding someplace. He's going to come back in the fall and exact his revenge on Vladimir Putin. I have no idea if any of this is true, so I guess let's wait till the end of the fall and see whether these conspiracy theories are true or not. The Russians came out and said that it was him. There was a funeral, although in the one video of the funeral, somebody said, hey, that's the wife that's leaving that's crying is the wife of Prigozhin's double. Most of these people, Putin has a double, Prigozhin has a double. For example, there was recently a video of Putin's double looking at his left arm to see if there was a watch or see how his watch was doing. Well, Putin wears his watch on his right hand. So everybody says, oh, see, there's his double. And I think that's fairly credible. But Prigozhin is dead, killed in an explosion. By most estimates, it was some kind of missile that took it down. The plane was at about 30,000 feet, and I don't know if the Ukrainians have anything that can reach that high. So you're probably going to have to fairly sophisticated military, so it's going to be Russia, the United States, or somebody that did that. It was very interesting. I think this was picked up by the Wall Street Journal. They had a great graphic showing Putin as the Godfather. Because if you remember the Godfather movie, my wife hates that I love the Godfather movie. I just think it's a great piece of cinema, and it's 50 years. I think it's 50 years old or 52 years old now. But in the Godfather, the main scene at the end, Michael was in the church, getting named as at the christening baptism of his nephew, his sister's son, and he was being named as the Godfather. While all of that was going on, while he was in the church, everybody was being assassinated that was his rivals in the mob families in New York. Mo Green and all those other guys. Putin, while Prigozhin's plane was being shot down, or when it exploded from an explosion, he was at a memorial remembering Russian war dead. So the Wall Street Journal and some other publications picked up on this and said, hey, he's the Godfather. So interesting comparison. So Prigozhin is dead now. What's the implications for that for Bible prophecy? Well, I think the implications are Twofold. Where Wagner Group was operated and had its most influence was, first of all, in the Ukrainian theater. But after the coup attempt 2 months ago in June, late June, Wagner pretty much was taken out of the Ukrainian theater. The word that came from Russia and everything was, we've taken away their heavy weaponry. We're making them sign loyalty oaths and that type of thing. It did appear, though, there was some credible arguments made that the coup was really a cover to get Wagner troops into Belarus and put them on the Polish and northern Ukraine borders. Everybody went on high alert in the area. Prigozhin was seen. Then Prigozhin all of a sudden showed up. He had meetings at the Kremlin, at least one meeting at the Kremlin with Putin. He was told to stay in Belarus, but words was that he was in Russia, seen in Russia, St. Petersburg, which was where the headquarters of the Wagner Group was located. So I don't know. Honestly, I'm not there, so I don't know if he's alive or dead or not. I think it's very likely that he's dead. But the implications of this from a Bible prophecy standpoint are the other area where Wagner had a lot of influence. The main Wagner influence was in two other areas. Syria, where the reports I've read over the last years, ever since Russia entered that area back about 2015, the Wagner Group has had about 5,000 soldiers, troops, mercenaries in Syria. Certainly not enough to take over the government, but enough to cause a lot of havoc if Assad got out of line. And Assad really has become, I think there's a competition whether he's a puppet of Russia or a puppet of Iran. But with Russia's involvement in Ukraine, Iran's influence in Syria has grown, as has its influence in Lebanon through Hezbollah, because we know Lebanon effectively as a government has completely collapsed. The economy has collapsed. Hezbollah seems to be picking up the pieces and exercising a tremendous amount of authority in Lebanon, which is interesting from a U.S. geopolitical perspective because Hezbollah clearly is the most powerful party in Lebanon. It effectively controls the government, even though there are some other. They don't have a prime minister. Lebanon is complete chaos. Remember, they had that explosion a couple of years ago in Beirut Harbor, and I don't know that much if any progress has been made on repairing that or putting in place structures so that will not happen again. So Hezbollah is also pushing the envelope along the southern border of Lebanon, the northern border of Israel, and that's where a lot of people are concerned. The other thing that's interesting is we send money to the Lebanese army, and I think it's pretty good conclusion that the money that we send to the Lebanese army ends up somehow in the hands of Hezbollah. Just like when we get a hostage released or hostages released, we pay Iran $6 billion in, quote, humanitarian aid. That humanitarian aid, then they don't have to spend money someplace so they can spend it on other money on terror activities or nuclear enrichment or whatever they want to do to cause havoc in the world. Same thing happens in Lebanon. We give money to the Lebanese army, but the Lebanese army is effectively a tool of Hezbollah. The other thing that's interesting, and I still haven't really been able to get a good explanation for this, is why is the United States building its second largest embassy in the world in Beirut? It's costing over $1 billion. I think the largest embassy in the world is in Baghdad. How's that one worked out? And now we're spending $1 billion to build this massive embassy in Beirut. You can look it up. Just look up U.S. Embassy Beirut, and you can see the pictures. So back to the Prigozhin-Putin thing. I think Putin did it. This is typical Putin activity, the way Putin gets rid of his rivals. And he was very clever in the way that he waited a couple months for this to happen. Now, again, it's possible Prigozhin is alive. This is all a head fake. But if it comes out now that Prigozhin is alive, I think Putin would be very, very embarrassed. And the one thing that I think Putin does is he's very careful in the way he does things as a general rule. I mean, maybe Ukraine is an exception to that because I don't think they've done great in Ukraine. I think part of that is their security apparatus was pretty much, they had to start from scratch, and it's changed over time. It's become more oriented towards supporting the Russian government as opposed to getting intelligence. They still cause a lot of havoc around the world. So, but I think it's changed. It's just like during the time that Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State, there was a security breach that exposed maybe hundreds of our security assets, the U.S. security assets in China. Pretty good to say, or pretty easy to say, and not speculate too much that every one of those assets was murdered and killed or imprisoned. We lost a lot of our assets. And when you look at what's been going on with the Biden family corruption, everything, maybe that's not such a surprise after all. So now there's one story I want to talk about yesterday, and I'll talk a little bit more detail about this on Sunday. And this is a story from Israel Hayom. I only have the Hebrew link to the story, so you can go to Israel Hayom and you can look it up. I'll post the Hebrew link in the show notes. If you take that link and you post it into Google Chrome, then in the right side of the address bar, Google Chrome will give you the ability to translate that to English or whatever your preferred language might be from Hebrew. There was a meeting yesterday at the UN. Now, there's going to be a lot of meetings at the UN over the next month. In about 2 weeks, all of the leaders of the world, all these little dictators and fascists and that type of thing are going to be making their annual parade to New York, giving speeches and that sort of thing. So ahead of that, there is a lot of maneuvering going on to achieve certain diplomatic outcomes. What you're going to see over the next couple weeks is a big push by the Palestinians and their allies and supporters to kind of shape the debate on the Palestinian issue. And again, I know they're not Palestinians. I know that this was a people group effectively made up by the Russian KGB back in 1964. Didn't really exist before then. So you're going to see a lot of push over the next 2 weeks at the UN. Just watch for it. Abbas and his allies are going to try to maneuver people into some kind of an outcome from the UN meetings, UN General Assembly meetings that's taking place. For example, at that meeting, you're also going to see a lot of push on the climate change issue. I don't think I'm going to really talk about that today. If I have time, maybe I'll mention it. But the story I really want to focus on is a story in Israel Hayom. Conflagration Beyond the Fence is the English translation. The U.S. is losing interest in the region. Russia is getting closer to Iran, and there's no one to restrain Nasrallah. This was written by Yoav Lemore, and it was in yesterday's Israel Hayom. It was a front page article. You can get the Hebrew version of that, by the way, at israelhayom.co. Hayom is HAYOM.co.il. And you can look at the PDF version. You can even copy the text if you want and go to Google Translate or someplace else and translate the text. But listen to what some of the subpoints of this are. The northern arena, this is the border between Israel and Lebanon, Israel and Syria, is heating up. Hezbollah, and by the way, Hezbollah operates in both Syria and Lebanon. They're probably the most effective, probably the most well-distributed anti-Israel group in that area. They maybe have 50,000 fighters, maybe 100,000. Iran has a lot of Syrian-backed groups also in the Golan Heights area. If you want to get a lot of good details about what's going on the northern border, I would highly recommend that you go to Alma, Israel, and the website address there is israel-alma.org. They have a lot of graphics, a lot of very good explanatory articles and blog posts about what's going on the northern border. And they do some video webinars, usually in English, usually with good analysts like Jonathan Spire and other people to explain what's going on. While I'm on recommending things, I would also recommend following Caroline Glick's JNS YouTube channel. That's Jewish News Service or Jewish News Syndicate. They have a YouTube channel, JNS. So if you just type in JNS Caroline Glick, and you can come up with all of her videos. She did a superb interview about a week ago with Richard Goldberg, who was involved in the State Department national security apparatus in the Trump administration about what's going on between the Biden administration and Iran, and how effectively the Biden administration has entered into some kind of new mini deal with Iran. I'm going to talk about more of that in the future because it's a pretty significant thing. But so Alma, Israel is where you should go to watch this. So listen to a little bit of what's in this article. Summer by its nature is a season prone to disaster, also in the military arena. Now this is a translation, so it reads a little bit rough. Armies by nature tend to avoid wars in winter, not only due to the objective difficulties of weather, but for fear of getting caught in a swampy mud that will be difficult to extricate yourself from. That is why we witness almost every year the constant threats and warnings of escalation and war in almost every possible arena. Similar to the strike threats in the school and the military world, too, this has become a familiar seasonal background music that passes and returns. And yet the situation this year is different than before. A series of matters and processes made the security reality in general, and this in the northern arena in particular, particularly challenging. So the political situation in Israel is still very volatile. It would not surprise me, by the way, I think there are a lot of parallels between what's going on in the United States and the weaponization of the judicial system against a former president, and what's going on in Israel and the weaponization of the judicial system there, and prosecutorial abuses against Prime Minister Netanyahu. Whether you like him or not, that's not the issue. The issue is he was democratically elected, yet the people are coming after him. The president of the Supreme Court, Hayut, she is supposed to be leaving in September, and I think there is a credible fear that she is going to somehow orchestrate granting some of the motions that have been brought that Netanyahu should be removed from office because he has a conflict of interest. In other words, we indicted him. We may have indicted him on a bunch of trumped up charges, but that's irrelevant. We indicted him is what people are saying. And now he's trying to use the democratically elected apparatus, whether you like it or not. They were, I don't think there's any allegations of fraud in the Israeli election. They are changing things in the judicial system. They did away with the reasonableness test. That's being challenged. So there's some people thinking that before Hayut goes, she's going to overturn the law that limits the power of the Supreme Court. And then the question will be, are people going to follow that? It's really forcing them into a situation where you have to disobey the order of the Supreme Court. It's not too dissimilar from the situation that I think we're on the verge of facing here in the United States. So the other thing, because Netanyahu is supposedly violating his agreement not to be engaged in the process to do judicial reform, there are people that have made motions with the court, and it's different in Israel. And in the United States, you have to have standing. You have to show that you have something at stake in order to bring a case in court. You just can't go into court and say, hey, I don't like what's going on. I think the court should intervene. The court will say, well, how are you being affected? That doesn't really seem to be the case in the Israeli system with rulings of the Israeli Supreme Court that anybody has standing. So the court may actually, before Hayut leaves office, may remove Netanyahu from office. And then the question is Netanyahu going to disobey the order and stay in office? This could effectively lead to a civil war in Israel. And while this is going on, you have the problem on the northern border with Hezbollah almost daily trying to test Israeli defenses, trying to probe the defenses, see how they react, and that sort of thing. Hezbollah is estimated to have 150 to 200,000 rockets, many of which now have a guidance system to allow them to strike more precisely. So what Gallant did this week in part of the maneuvering leading up to the UN General Assembly meetings is he went to New York and he had a meeting yesterday with Guterres. And essentially what he said was, look, we are going to have a major problem situation on our northern border, and something needs to be done. Let me pull up. Hang on a second. Apologize for this. I thought I had the article up. So this meeting took place yesterday. I think it was yesterday or Tuesday at the UN. And he came right out and said, listen, the Nasrallah is making threats, and we're closer to having another Lebanon war than we've ever been before. And I think he's right. I don't think he had any reason to make this up. Nasrallah issued some other threats against Israel just this week. I'll show you a little clip of that speech that he gave the other day. From his bunker somewhere, probably in Beirut. He rarely sticks his head up above the ground. I don't know. He's been living underground for a long time because he knows if he sticks his head out, he's going to get taken out. So just be watching for that maneuvering that's going to take place. You can go to JPost. You can get the article about Gallant's meeting. It's all over the press. You can actually go to the UN website and you can get some information on it there. The other thing that I want to bring up is another article that appeared in today's Jerusalem Post. That was an article written by Dr. Mordecai Kedar. Now, I have tremendous respect for Dr. Kedar. He is an expert on the Arabic language, Arabic culture, Arabic society, how Arabic society is organized, and Islam. He wrote, for example, about 15 years ago, he wrote a phenomenal article on how that Islam really had no religious claim to the Temple Mount, in the sense that this is not where Muhammad went for his night journey to the farthest mosque. The farthest mosque was somewhere near Mecca in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has allowed that type of information to be published in the last couple of years. And some people think, including me, that this is sort of a precursor to Mohammed bin Salman wanting to change who's in control of the Temple Mount after his father passes away. Arab society is very tribal, respect for the elder. I do not think that Mohammed bin Salman will do anything relative to the Palestinian issue or the Temple Mount issue that differs from his father until his father has passed away. So I would expect things, though, that when King Salman does pass away, I think he's 87 now, that things will move rather rapidly. which is what they do in just about everything today. So Dr. Kadar in today's Jerusalem Post has a superb article. I'll put the link in the show notes after I finish here. Don't let the Saudis have any role in the Temple Mount. Put Israel in charge. Now, Dr. Kadar is Jewish. I literally came within seconds of meeting him when I was there in December. That's one of the things I regret about my trip in December. I didn't get to talk to him. If you can find interviews with Dr. Kadar, he's a professor, he's intelligent, and he really knows his stuff. So he mentions that there were talks recently about giving the Saudis charge of the Temple Mount. And part of this is to get the Saudis to come into a normalization agreement with Israel. Now, I personally think that this is the way that it may go. There has not ever been a lot of warm, fuzzy feelings between the Saudi regime and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. There might be some consolation prizes given to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. I've talked about that, where there was this proposal that's been floated over the last year, over the last 15 months, called the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine by Mohammed bin Salman. That may move forward too when King Salman dies. But this is going to be difficult for the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, to make these type of changes. There's a lot of people in Saudi Arabia that are really committed to the Palestinian issue and resolving it in that they get yet another state. It was Jordan, Israel, and now they want a third state. It's not a two-state solution. It's a 3 or 4 state solution. Everybody knows that's thinking about that. And this is going on. So I think things are going to happen very quickly, and we're going to give some ideas. Now, Dr. Kadar thinks, don't give the Saudis any official status in Jerusalem. The Saudis are already trying to do this. They've established a, quote, non-resident consulate or ambassador to the Palestinian people. He can't go to Israel yet because they need to get the Israeli approval for that. And again, I think you're seeing what the Crown Prince wants to do. You're seeing indicators of it. But it's not going to happen until the king passes away, in my opinion. And Kadar makes a great argument in this article in the Jerusalem Post that Israel shouldn't do this. Israel should take control of the Temple Mount. It's where our holiest site was. It's where the temple was. It's been the center of our culture worship for 3,000 years. And giving anybody else control of it, like Moshe Dayan did after the 1967 war when Israel took back the Temple Mount. Dayan gave it back almost right away to the Jordanians. And that sends the message in the Islamic world, oh, you guys don't really care about this. This Israel thing is not that important to you. It's important to us because we would die for it. So that's something to pay attention to. Let's see if there's one other thing that I wanted to say. And I will show you a lot of images on Sunday to show you how in the Islamic world, Jerusalem is very important. Whether they have a valid religious claim to it or not, now they've possessed it, and that under their religion, it becomes something that they have control of, and they should be able to decide who does what. And so I'll show you pictures. I'll show you pictures from Iran. I'll show you pictures from Turkey, from other countries that focus on the Jerusalem issue. I've shown you pictures from Yeni Safek that this issue of Jerusalem needs to be resolved, and that paper was published the day after Trump announced that the United States was going to move the United States embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And he did. But Erdogan had a meeting immediately of the Islamic states in Istanbul. They issued a lot of decisions. And remember, they came out with that graphic that showed all the tanks and jets and everything focused around Israel and Jerusalem. Khamenei uses the Dome of the Rock. Iran uses the Dome of the Rock image and pictures and they even have what I call the Dome of the Rock bouncy house that they trot out whenever they're revealing another missile or some kind of laser technology or something. They always bring out their Dome of the Rock bouncy house, this blow up Dome of the Rock, to use in their images because it's important to them, and this is what inflames the Islamic world. To give you an example of that, there was a discussion that took place between the Libyan foreign minister. This does relate. Libya is put in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And we know that they'll come in a coalition against Israel at some point. So the Libyan foreign minister had a meeting with the Israeli representative, maybe the ambassador or somebody involved in the Israeli government. I can't remember what her name was right now or her position. And what they're doing is, and that led to riots and demonstrations all across Libya because they hate Israel. And so this is all very prophetic. This is all sort of showing that everything's circling around Israel in the end times. The other thing that I'm noticing is, I don't know how to say it, is among people who claim to be conservatives in the United States is just that you who support Israel are wrong, you're causing all the problems in the world. It's anti-Semitism on steroids, and it's coming from the political side of the aisle that a lot of us might agree with. So you need to be on the guard for that because you're going to see more and more of that. It's also interesting, and I think I'll finish with this, and I'll just look to see if there are a couple quick questions. Now I forget what I was going to talk about. Well, that shows that I am getting older. Well, if I remember it all. Oh, I know what it is. 30 years ago. So the UN meeting is coming up in mid-September. A couple of days before it begins is the 30th anniversary of the signing of the Oslo Accords on the White House lawn in the United States in Washington, D.C., before a crowd of 3,000 witnesses. Now, that has some biblical implications or similarities to it. Remember, there were 3,000 killed when Moses came down from the mountain with the law and they were worshiping the golden calf. And there were 3,000 souls added to the church at Pentecost. So in front of 3,000 witnesses on the White House lawn on September 13th, 1993, you remember the photograph and video of Clinton making Yitzhak Rabin shake hands with Yasser Arafat, this horrible terrorist, this horrible Egyptian terrorist who adopted the Palestinian or the Palestinian Arab identity and caused a lot of problems. So that was 30 years ago, and we're still paying, Israel is still paying the price of Oslo. While we're speaking, every day I'm seeing terrorist attacks in Israel. Yesterday, on the light rail line between the northern part of the old city and Hebrew University, I actually took that light rail line when I was in Jerusalem in December and got off near this one stop where an Israeli Jewish man was stabbed to death last night. There was a ramming attack. I don't even remember where today. And usually in these situations, Israel just says that the terrorist was neutralized, which means they killed him. But there was a ramming attack today, and I believe an Israeli was killed in that. There's talk that the level of violence being seen approaches that of the Second Intifada over the past year. And I think that's true. The political situation, though, in Israel makes it difficult for the responses, and it only exacerbates everything. In addition to that, there's essentially a mob war going on among bad elements in Arab society to see who takes control of everything. Everything is very volatile. Everything's on a hair trigger, and I think I just think you need to pay attention to all of these things. Read the Jerusalem Post, read Israel Hayom, I would also highly recommend to go jns.org. They have Jonathan Tobin, Melanie Phillips, Caroline Glick, a host of really good writers and thinkers on the issue. So let's see. So anyway, we'll see how this all goes. So let me just see. So here's a question. Do you think the covenant the AC makes is with many other nations and not just Israel? Well, I'm going to interpret your question, Jesus is Lord.G3841, in that I think you might be asking about the theory that's going around that the covenant that is referenced in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, is really this covenant and the 2030 and the 7 years to get to the sustainable development goals of 2030. I don't think that's the covenant. I think it has to do with the land of Israel and some specific things in the land of Israel. That's what I think. So now I have to figure out how to hide that. Here's another question. Let's see. Is there any specific reason the mark of the beast can only be in the forehead or right hand, but not the left hand? I think the only reason that people focus on it is because that's what Scripture says is where it will be. So anyway, I'll put links to the Kedar article, links to the Israel Hayom Hebrew article, and you can figure out how to translate that in Google Chrome. It has a very easy translation thing for articles in any foreign language. And then Sunday we'll talk about that. We'll talk about a host of other issues. I did do a show last night or 2 days ago with Tony from Minute to Midnight. You might look that up on YouTube. We talked a little bit more about Maui. That whole situation in Maui is the best thing you can describe it as, that it certainly appears that there's some sort of a big cover-up going on. They don't answer questions. They won't talk to people. There's a guy that I would recommend that you follow. I don't agree with everything he says, but he's doing a good job. As a citizen journalist, he may be reaching the wrong conclusions. Let's see here. And I think it's Hawaii Real Estate YouTube channel. And he's going around looking at things that he can get access to. But what they've done is they've limited access of anybody to get into the town of Lahaina. It was 3 weeks ago, Tuesday, that this thing happened. They still haven't really released, at least that I've not seen, good list of who's missing, of the dead or anything like that. And then what they did is the guy from Hawaii Real Estate was driving around. There's a chain link fence up for a few miles along the road on the Lahaina side with black batting on it. And my question is, how did they get that much chain link fencing to Hawaii to erect it that quickly? Did they just have that much chain link fencing and black batting laying around? It just seems very odd to me that in 3 weeks they've been able to do this. I know they're not that hard to put up, but it just seems like there's a lot of other things they should be doing to take care of people. So I'm going to terminate this. Sunday morning, I'll be back at FBC at 11 a.m. doing a live update, and I will see you later. Thanks for listening. Oh, like and subscribe, share, all that usual stuff. Thanks.